All right. So this is Spanish 2 Test 3. It is going to cover everything in Chapter 3. There are 46 questions. So it is a short test, but there is a lot packed into it because they've covered a lot in those 3 lessons. The first section is questions 1 through 5. Part 1, demonstrative adjectives. So that's going to be este, ese, and aquel. Okay. This, that, and that over there. Okay. So this is something within the speaker's reach. That is within the reach of the person they're talking to, and that over there is within no one's reach. So as you should remember, adjectives have to match in gender and number with the nouns that they're describing. So what this is going to look like is, it says write the demonstrative adjective that matches in meaning, gender, and number. Okay. So what I'm going to do is you're going to have a blank, and it's going to say something like this, and then it's going to say botella. Okay. So now this is a feminine singular noun. So you have to decide which one of those 3 means this. It was este. But this is masculine. This is feminine. So we have to change the este to an esta. Okay. If this were plural, then you'd have to add an S to this to make it plural, because that has to match this in gender and number. If I had something like that over there, and I had carros, okay, the demonstrative adjective that means that over there is aquel, but this is plural, so it has to be aquellos. All right. So I gave you guys charts, I'm pretty sure I did this, the plural and masculine and feminine and singular charts for all of these. So make sure that you're referring back to your notes. The next section is part 2. It is 6 through 10. Part 2, 6 through 10. This is indirect objects and direct objects, specifically pronouns. So this says, rewrite the following sentences replacing the direct and indirect objects with pronouns. I also underlined the direct and indirect, and on your test it says how I did it. So like the direct objects have a straight line under them, and indirect objects have like a squiggly line under them, so that you can tell which one is which. So I'm not even asking you to tell me which one is which. I'm asking you to, like I'm telling you which one, and you just have to tell me how to replace it. Note, I also have the word replaced underlined twice, because that means oftentimes in homework what I see is students put in a pronoun, but they don't realize that the pronoun replaces the direct object or indirect object. So they put both. So I am telling you specifically to replace it. Okay. So you might have something like el padre presenta la comida a los niños. All right. El padre presenta la comida a los niños. So the dad presents the food to the kids. All right, so I've got this underlined and this squiggly line. So this is kind of what it looks like on your test. Straight underline is the direct object. The squiggly underline is the indirect object. So you have to decide what direct object pronoun is going to replace la comida, and you have to decide what indirect object is going to replace a los niños. And then Not only that, but you have to decide where it goes in the sentence because remember that there are rules as to where they go. So let's start out deciding what our pronoun is going to be. So the direct object pronouns are me, te, lo, la, nos, los, las. Okay. The indirect object pronouns are me, te, le, nos, and les. Right? So to replace la comida, we have to pick the singular feminine, which is right down here. So this is going to be la. A los niños, indirect object pronoun, plural, and it's like saying they or them, so it's got to be les. All right. So now I've got my pronouns. I'm going to erase this. And then remember that there were, let's see, there's one conjugated verb. Goes before infinitive. Oops. And command, well, infinitive. You can go before conjugated or after and attached to infinitive. And then 3, you've got, I guess we could say infinitive and present progressive. We've got a command, which we have not done yet. Those go after and attached to the command. Okay, you will not have commands on the test because we have not learned commands yet, but just so you know. So the ones that you're going to be dealing with are these two scenarios right here. One conjugated verb, infinitive, or present progressive. So the present progressive is like the estar and then the present participle, like indicating that you're doing something right that moment. So if you have a sentence with an infinitive in it, you normally have a conjugated verb as well. So you can either put it before the conjugated verb or you can attach it to the infinitive. Either one is fine. You just can't put it like between them, like after the conjugated, before the infinitive. It has to either go before the conjugated or after the infinitive. Same with the present progressive. Since the present progressive has a conjugated verb estar, you can put it before estar or you can put it after and attached to the present participle. Okay, so those are placement rules. So that means that we have to decide now what kind of sentence we're dealing with. There's no infinitive, it's not a command, and there's no present progressive. So we have one conjugated verb. That means that these pronouns have to go together before the verb, all right? So another thing that you have to think about is the order of pronouns. So we've decided that they have to go before the verb, but which one goes first? Remember, I told you people before things, or I said to remember RID, which stands for reflexive, indirect, and direct. Okay, so that means that when you have a mix of 2 or 3 of these, reflexive, indirect, direct, reflexive always goes first, and then indirect, and then direct. Now, you might not all have all 3 of them, like you might have a reflexive and a direct object, so then you put the reflexive first and then the direct object. Or in our case, when we're dealing with indirect and direct, indirect always has to go first. This works because indirect objects are people, because it tells for whom or to whom something is done. Things are normally, or direct objects are normally things, but that's not 100% of the time, so that's why it's better to memorize this. So then we can say, all right, so we've got to put my indirect object before my direct object. So we're going to rewrite this sentence. El padre les la presenta. If you're freaking out right now because you noticed that I made an error, I did it on purpose. Okay, I wanted to see if you would freak out. Remember, you cannot have lay or lace in front of lo, la, los, or las. All right? Okay? We can't have le or les before lo, la, los, or las. It can be in front of me, it can be in front of te, it can be in front of nos, just not lo, la, los, las. So what do we do with le and les before one of those? Scratch it out and we put se. It becomes se. So the final answer is el padre se la presenta. Right? So the indirect object pronoun becomes se before le, lo, la, los, las. So le or les becomes se before lo, la, los, las. Yes? What's wrong? Okay. All right, so let's do another example. There are just a lot of parts to this kind of thing. So we could say something like, nosotros necesitamos dar la tarea. Let's do dar los tacos a ustedes. Right? So, los tacos a ustedes. Direct, indirect. All right, so los tacos, we're going to replace this with los, our direct object pronoun. We're going to replace a ustedes with les. Okay? Let's do a different one. All right, I changed my mind. Let's do a T. This is the informal you. I wanted to do a different thing. So nosotros necesitamos dar los tacos a ti. That means to you. So this is the informal. All right, this is the informal you, which means that my indirect object is going to be te. Indirect or informal you is te. All right, we have in this sentence, we have a conjugated verb and an infinitive. So you've got an option. Okay, so when I rewrite this, I'm going to say nosotros, and then I'm going to say te los necesitamos. Dar de los. All right, do you see what I did? I put them in parentheses to show that you have options. Now, you will not put both of these in your answer on the test. You're going to pick one, okay? So, I could either say this, nosotros te los necesitamos dar. Okay, that's perfectly correct. Or I could say, nosotros necesitamos dártelos. Also perfectly correct, all right? So you're not doing both. Don't put them in parentheses. I just did that to show you that, okay, it's optional here or here. Okay, so there you go for that. Now, we did not change this to say because, remember, me, te, nos is just fine in front of the lo, la, los, las. People before things, indirect before direct, indirect before direct, right? Okay. Part 3 is going to be select, the correct translations of the following sentences. So this is going to be verbs like gustar. Okay, so this is actually going to be multiple choice. So I have written a sentence in English. Oh man. A sentence in English. And then I have written 2 sentences in Spanish. One of them is correct, one of them is not correct. It's your job to pick the correct one. Obviously, I wouldn't have you pick the wrong one. So this is going to cover stuff like, if you have gustar, and because remember, gustar is not conjugated typically. It's like we don't say, yo gusto el pastel, like I like cake. We translate it, the cake is pleasing to me. So we use indirect objects to indicate to whom it is pleasing, and then the thing that is being liked is the subject. So for example, if I said, I like the cake, you might have an option like or what? He's mad because the door's closed. Move. Open it. Move. He just likes having the option of going outside. He doesn't necessarily want to go outside because he's currently just standing in the doorway. All right. Anyway, so back to this. I like the cake. So you have two options: me gustan el pastel or me gusta el pastel. So this is the subject. All right. If it's a singular subject, remember that we just ended in an A. If it's a plural subject, that's when it gets the A-N. So since this is singular, this has to be the answer because the thing that is being liked is singular. This is the singular verb. So it's got to be B, all right? So you're just going to like circle the one that is correct, all right? You might have something like, I don't want to write all of the options. Sports, food. Food is interesting to him, all right? Because remember, there are other verbs that are like gustar. So we would say maybe a él lo interesante la comida. Okay. Or B, a él le interesante la comida. Okay. All right, so which one is correct? Here, what you're deciding against is lo or le. Now, I've already said that with verbs like gustar, we use indirect object pronouns to indicate to whom the thing is interesting, important, being liked, missing, that kind of stuff. So, this is a direct object pronoun, and this is an indirect object pronoun. So because we're dealing with verbs like gustar, it has to be this one. Because we don't use direct object pronouns to indicate who is liking the thing, all right? Okay, so you need to know your indirect object pronouns. You might have a question that asks you to differentiate between the you formal and the you informal. The plural, singular, like the subject is plural, the subject is singular, like you need to know like which conjugation of the verb gustar, importar, faltar, remember bastar, I think is on there. Okay. Yeah, so you basically need to know your indirect object pronouns. I think that should be good enough over that. Okay. Part 4 is reflexive pronouns and verbs. So part 4. What now? All right, so this is going to look pretty similar to your homework, actually. It says, write the reflexive pronoun and correct form of the verb in the present tense in the blank, all right? So you're using the present tense of the verb because that's all we've done this semester is present tense. So you're going to have a sentence, and then you're going to have a blank, and then I'm going to give you a reflexive verb. I want you to make it reflexive, all right? So you might have something like, to los dientes. Okay, and then I might give you the verb cepillarse. Whoops. Not an A. The cepillarse. All right. So it's going to look like this. You're going to have a sentence with a blank, and then I'm going to actually give you the verb. So how do we make this a reflexive construction? Guys, that's enough. You take the say off, and then you treat this part of the verb just like any other verb, all right? You need to know how to conjugate the reflexive verbs. Some of them are stem changers, some of them are regular. This happens to be a regular verb. So once I take this off, I conjugate it like any other AR verb. So how do we say, how do we conjugate a verb for two? We say cepillas, right? AR verb in the present tense. Then I got to deal with this. Because my subject is two and reflexives, there must be something outside that he wants. Because my subject is two, and when my verbs are reflexive, it generally means that the subject is also the doer of the action, is also the receiver of the action. So this has to be two. This has to match two. So my reflexive pronouns are me, te, se, nos, and se. All right. So te has to be my pronoun. We have to decide where we're going to put it. Does it go after and attached? Does it go before? Since there's only one conjugated verb in this sentence, in the whole sentence, there's only one, our pronoun has to go here, before the verb, okay? You might have a sentence where there's already a conjugated verb. And so you have to figure out, do I conjugate this verb or do I leave it as an infinitive? All right, so you have to be looking at the entire sentence. Let's see. You need to know how to conjugate acostarse, lavarse, levantarse, irse, and calmarse. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and give you those. Those are the verbs that are on the test. Oh, I forgot to tell you, this is 16 through 20, so it's 5 questions. So those are the 5 verbs that you need to know how to deal with and conjugate them, okay? All right, part 5 and 6. I'm not going to do another example of this because I think this is kind of self-explanatory. All right, part 5 and 6. 5 is 21 to 28 to 28. And 6 is going to be 29 to 36. Those are both translations. So part 5 is English to Spanish. And so obviously this one's going to be Spanish to English. Oh, that was a terrible E. Be aware of definite articles in both sections. So like if I said la camisa, you can't just say shirt because that word right there means the. So you have to say the shirt. And then vice versa, if I said the belt, you have to say el cinturón. All right? You have to be aware of that. Also with verbs, if I give you an infinitive, because a lot of your vocabulary was the reflexive verbs, if I said something like lavar, say, you can't just say wash, okay? Because this is an infinitive. An infinitive, by definition, means to verb. So because this verb means wash, you have to say to wash, all right? So you have to be aware of the articles, okay, and infinitives, which mean to. All right, last section is section 7, 37 to 46. So this is going to cover all of the, those 2 sections, cover all the vocabulary from chapter 3. If you were absent on a day, you need to get in touch with one of your classmates and go through, because remember, I don't make you memorize every single word normally from each lesson. So you need to be communicating between you guys, your classmates, and figuring out that if you were absent, okay, which words did she tell us to know? because those are the ones, I have them marked in my book, those are the ones that I'm pulling from for the test, all right? So part 7, that just goes kind of to another thing. If you're absent, it's your responsibility to get the information that you missed, all right? So you should be doing that anyway. 7. All right, so this is going to be translations. Like I said, it was 37 to 46, all right? Okay, this is going to deal with uses of the infinitive, reflexive. Oh, the verb decir was one of the things. We only had one verb, so I didn't have enough verbs to do like a whole verb section, so I'm just throwing decir in with the translations. Yeah, okay. So really not that many. So if I were going to say something like, I like the shoe. Ooh. Okay. Also, I forgot that we talked about the relative pronoun K. That was like linking separate clauses. Like you could say, I like the shoes. Stephen has shoes, and like I like them. So this right here is going to be a relative pronoun K that links to sentences. All right. So I like would be me gusta the shoes, los zapatos that Stephen has. Que Stefan has. How do you say has? Tener is tiene. All right, now what's wrong with this? Okay. The shoes that Stephen has are pleasing to me. Here is my subject. Is my verb conjugated correctly for my subject? No, it's not. This is plural, so this has to be gustan. Okay, so it needs to be me gustan los zapatos que Stefan tiene. That's it. Okay. You might have something like let's say they. Okay. They wash their hands before eating. Okay, so this is reflexive because they are washing and they are receiving the washing. So we would say ellos or ellas, either one. Then there's only going to be one verb. There's no infinitive in this. So we're going to put our reflexive pronoun before the verb. So we're going to say ellas se lavan, because to wash is lavarse, right? So conjugate lavar for they, it gets lavan, there's one verb. They, the reflexive pronoun is se anyway, so the se goes before the verb. Now, are we going to say sus manos or las manos? Okay, it has to be las manos. And then before eating is antes de comer. Okay. I think this was actually one of the things that we talked about too, like with the use of the infinitive. So, and the infinitive after a preposition makes an ing. Okay. So why is this las instead of sus, like their hands? In English, we say their hands, I brush my hair, we wash our feet, whatever it is, my, your, his, her. In Spanish, it is redundant and awkward because this right here shows that you're doing it to them yourself. They are doing the washing to themselves. So they wouldn't say like themselves there. They wash themselves their hands. They say like they wash themselves the hands. Okay? So whenever you're talking about a specific body part, you use the definite article, not a possessive pronoun. So definite article is el, la, los, las, right? And then manos is very misleading because it looks like it should be masculine, but it is actually a feminine word. So if you were to have this on your test, I expect you to know as Spanish 2 students, especially since I'm laboring this point, manos is feminine. Manos is feminine. You have to say las manos. All right? Then we might have something like I can't decide. Let's do he says the verse. Okay? Says. To say is decir. D-E-C-I-I. So we say él dice el versículo. The verse is versículo, right? Remember that decir is a stem changer. It's E to I. It also has a go in the yo. So if you're conjugating decir, it looks like digo, dices, dice, decimos, and dicen. Okay? It's a terrible N. Because remember, it's a boot. Irregular stem changers are boot verbs, which means that these stem change, but the nosotros and the vosotros don't stem change. So this is decimos, go in the yo. Other ones are regular IR, but they stem change. Okay. Then you might have something like, it's bad to, I don't know, talk in class. Unless your teacher wants you to. Okay. Let's just say it's bad to talk in class while the teacher's talking. We'll say that. So this is an impersonal expression. So it's bad is represented by es malo. Okay? When you have an impersonal expression, then the next thing that follows is an infinitive verb. We know this not only because this is an impersonal expression, but also because this right here, what you're trying to say is to talk. And by definition, an infinitive means to verb. So because you have to and talk, you know that this has to be an infinitive. Hablar en clase. All right? Okay. All right. So that is basically what your test is over. I'm going to give you some key words that you need to know. You need to be aware of all of those impersonal expressions like it's important, it's good, it's bad, it's interesting, it's necessary. Okay, so I'm going to pull from that list that I just gave you. You need to know how to say study. You need to know how to say, let's see, study, bathe, self, to bathe yourself. Want. So this would be querer. Okay, so you need to know how to conjugate querer. Then you need to know the word for teacher. You need to know to teach. The verb to teach. You need to know science. You need to know to arrive. You need to know class. You need to know late. You need to know wash. Self. So the reflexive bathe, reflexive wash. Before. After. You need to know the prepositions for before and after. You need to know the word for lesson. You need to know the word to eat. I've kind of given up. To eat. All right? Cool. All right. Everything else is probably vocabulary, or you should just know it. Okay? There are 3 extra credit questions. They are the cultural notes and the what page is there on? Pages 82, 83, and 95. 82, 83, and 95. Those are the places where I pulled your extra credit questions from. And they're true false, so no big deal. All right, so make sure that you're reading the chapters, even if I didn't read word for word the chapter in class. When you're studying, you need to be going back and reading the chapters. You should be looking at your homework to see what did I do well on, what did I not, what do I need to spend time looking at. You need to be looking over your notes, going over your vocabulary again. Yep. If you're struggling with vocabulary, here's a side note. I may have already said this. If you're struggling with your vocabulary, what I want you to do is make yourself a fake quiz. So you're going to pull some random words from each list and say, okay, I'm going to translate these to Spanish. So you're going to write them in English. Then you're going to pull more random words. You're going to write them in the opposite, whatever I just said. Write some in English, write some in Spanish. Close your book, put your notes away, and then go through it and pretend like it's a test and try to define them. Okay? Then go back and look in your book. Did I get them right? I believe that it is the act of putting yourself through a fake assessment, like closed book assessment, is what pushes your information from short-term to long-term memory. And it'll help you to cope when you're actually in the test and you're freaking out and you're like, okay, how do I look for this answer in my head? Like, I know it, but like, what is it? And it just kind of trains your brain to respond to that stress, I think. So that's how I always tell students who struggle with vocabulary to study. So there you go. If that helps you, great. If it doesn't, then I hope that you can figure out how to do it on your own. So let me know if you have any questions. And that's it.